Hello, everybody. I hope we're all good, or at least doing the best we can through this. I've been meaning to put out a follow-up video to my first project for a while now. Time is just so short for me these days, and the information keeps piling up. So rather than a longer combined effort, which may never get done, I'm just going to start breaking these down into shorter, more specific videos. But again, my intention here is to present the information that we're able to share with our friends and family that may help them understand what is happening and, more importantly, prevent them from living in fear. Anybody watching this now that has not seen the first video in the series should probably take the time to watch that one first, as it might help complete the picture. The link is below in the description. And you can always watch at a quicker speed by clicking on the three dots in the upper right hand corner and adjusting the playback speed. But let's get into it. There is a reason that the television has been pushing the new normal since the beginning. I remember seeing commercials and the news telling me about the new normal just a couple weeks into this in March and April, which has been occurring this entire time. 8 months later, same thing, just conditioning us to accept what's occurring. So on July 6th, you have Fox News, C19, experts says Americans will be wearing masks for several years. July 26th, Sky News, Tony Blair says C19 is here for the foreseeable future. August 22nd, Sky News, a sage scientist warns C19 will be with us forever. August 26th, World Health Organization, we cannot go back to the way things were. And then October 21st, another update from the sage scientist, says C19 will exist forevermore, and a second wave could kill tens of thousands. On August 30th, the CDC comes out with a report that shows 94% of the C19 deaths in the United States had contributing conditions. And on their website, it says for 6% of the deaths, C19 was the only cause mentioned. For deaths with conditions or causes in addition to C19, on average, there were 2.6 additional conditions or causes per death. So as I look today, the news is telling me there have been 247,000 deaths in the United States from C19, which when you do the math, that breaks down to just under 15,000 total, where C19 was the only cause. And here is some very telling information on the CDC's website. Infection fatality ratio 0 to 19.00003, 20 to 49.0002, 50 to 69.005, and then 7 years old and over 0.054% of the people that catch it die, which is basically 1 out of every 2,000 people in that age group. And then you look over to the right, which is the influenza mortality rate, which numbers from 2017, 2018 flu season. Also on the CDC's website, the same age group, so 65 years old and over, they're showing that it's 100 out of every 100,000 people died from the flu, which is 0.1, which is basically 1 out of every 1,000 people. Okay, here we have Dr. Eric Berg, who did a really good video, still up. You can find it. The title of the video is "Why is the C19 Death Rate So Low?" He compares the numbers as they were in April versus where they are in October. And comparing the infection rate from April versus October, it has gone up by 2 times the amount of people in the United States, 4 times in France, 3 times higher in UK, etc. That's the first category. The second category shows the amount of testing that has gone up. So in the United States, it is 6.5 times greater right now than it was in April. France, 7 times. United Kingdom, 15.5 times more testing, etc. And then we get over to the actual death rate. And if you look over, it's the last category. There are 3 times less deaths in October from this than there were in April in the United States. Look all the way down there. And what you're going to see is Sweden on the bottom. If you guys remember, Sweden was the country that did not lock down. There was no government lockdown, no mask requirements. 80% of the deaths were from people in nursing homes. Virtually nobody under 70 died from it. Of course, our media is not going to tell us any of that. And they're also not going to tell us about how the amount of testing has gone up significantly during this time, which is why you're getting all these cases. And we'll get over into the actual testing shortly. And this should help put those numbers into perspective. You see the dark red on the bottom, those are the amount of cases. So the lower right is about 3 times higher. So there are about 3 times more infections now than there were in April. And then the light red, which is just going straight up, is the amount of testing that has increased. So yes, it is about 15 times more testing that's occurring right now than there was in April. Here we have an article from the Times in the United Kingdom, October 10th. It says the average age of the C-19 fatalities is 82. We look over to the United States, life expectancy, which is about 70.5 years. And the average life expectancy in the world is just about 73 years old. So, Then on November 8th, Just the News put up this story. It says, in newly resurfaced video from July, Dr. Fauci appeared to acknowledge the large number of positive C-19 cases may arise from oversensitive tests that pick up mere fragments of the virus rather than active, viable infections. The admission came on a July 16th episode of This Week in Virology, a longtime science podcast hosted by Columbia University virologist Vincent Rassaniello. Concerns have been raised over the last several months that the laboratory tests widely deployed to detect this, what are known as PCR tests, may in fact be picking up remnants of the virus instead of meaningful levels of infection. Some critics have argued that significant numbers of positive C-19 tests are actually not infectious at all. At the center of the debate is the cycle threshold at which the PCR test operates. PCR tests work by multiplying a virus fragment over a series of cycles until it can reliably detect and confirm the virus within a sample. The more cycles a test runs through before it detects the virus, the smaller and weaker the original sample was. High cycles, in other words, are expected to correlate to weaker viral samples, indicating that a patient's positive case in that context may be more or less meaningless. Fauci says at high levels, the chances of it being accurate are minuscule. And then Fauci directly responded to a question about the C-19 testing, specifically how patients with positive tests might determine whether or not they are actually infectious and need to quarantine. He says, what is now sort of evolving into a bit of a standard, if you get a cycle threshold of 35 or more, the chances of it being replication confident are minuscule. It's very frustrating for the patients as well as for the physicians, he continued. When somebody comes in and they repeat their PCR and it's like a 37 cycle threshold, but you almost never can culture virus from a 37 cycle. So if you think somebody comes in with 37, 38, even 36, you gotta say, it's just dead nucleotides, period. Fauci noted that patients who receive a positive C-19 diagnosis are not immediately given the cycle threshold on their test. He says, when someone comes in and it's positive, they don't give them the threshold until you go back and ask for it, he said. So how many people even know to do that? And there's a doctor named Tom Cowan who's been speaking out. A lot of his stuff's been censored, but he shows how basically any person can have a positive result of this when they magnify the test enough. And then also on a video still up, I believe it's called Operation X Moon X Shot. A doctor named Andrew Kaufman, who's also been great, breaks down all of the information that he got from the National Health Service in England and came up with a 92% false positive rate for all these tests, meaning 8% of all of the positive tests that you see on the news are people that actually do have this. Okay, and then speaking of the National Health Service, November 5th, one of their nurses publicly resigns, blasts the C lockdown policy. She says, unfortunately, I can't lie anymore. Okay, the article states, the whole of England officially entered lockdown 2.0 today, despite numerous experts warning that lockdowns will eventually end up killing more people than the C does itself. A video out of Cornwall shows a nurse in uniform giving a speech explaining why she decided to resign from her job. She says, I don't need the uniform to prove that I work for them, but today I am publicly resigning. The nurse then revealed how she received an email from her bosses demanding an explanation as to why she was being critical of official CV policy and that people were reporting her. She says, unfortunately, I can't lie anymore, explaining how she took a screenshot of internal hospital data showing there were just 3 people across the 3 hospitals in the region infected with C-19. The total deaths from these 3 hospitals across the last 7 months is just 76 people, roughly 10 deaths a month, according to the nurse, who questioned why it was necessary for her region to go into lockdown, given such sparse figures. She says, I've decided there's no point. I have gone against the rules within the NHS. I have shared confidential information that people need to see, adding that other doctors and nurses were trying to speak out as well. November 12th, Elon Musk tweets, something extremely bogus is going on. Was tested for C 4 times today. 2 tests came back negative, 2 tests came back positive. Same machine, same test, same nurse, rapid antigen test from BD. And then if you guys remember Erykah Badu, the musician, another tweet from her on November 13th. It says, no symptoms, was tested for the C. Same machine, left nostril positive, right nostril negative. The doctor only reported the positive result. What is going on here? Rapid test. $, shake my head. Okay, here it shows your chance of surviving C-19 based on age and sex. You'll see pretty high survival rates across the board here. Okay, and then this was a pretty good meme. It says, with the survival rate of the Rona being close to 100% without a V, what exactly will be the purpose of the new V? Okay, and above you'll see a chart of the United States showing the flu cases in October. And then we have the World Health Organization, Dr. Sylvie Briand. She's the Director of Global Infectious Hazard Preparedness. She says, maybe it's due to their measures in the southern hemisphere during their influenza season. They saw a very limited flu transmission. It was unexpected and very surprising, but there was nearly no flu this year in the southern hemisphere. So we hope that the situation will be the same in the northern hemisphere and hope that all the precautionary measures are good for preventing the flu as well. And then October 19th, Fox News did a story, see flu cases down 95% this year compared to last year in the week 40 to 41. Probably because anytime anybody has a flu or cold, they are being labeled as something else for a specific agenda. Okay, and then here is a new poll that asked Americans how many people in the country have had C-19 or died from it. You see each little dot represents 100,000 people. On top, their answer, 20% of Americans have had it, 9% have died from it. And the reality on the bottom, 1% of Americans have had it, which is the upper left corner there in blue. And then 0.04% of Americans have died from it, which is a tiny little red dot over in California. And this wasn't my first video, but it's very important, so I'm bringing it back into this one. In the upper left, you have the Director of Health in Illinois. She says, if you were in hospice and had already been given a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have the C, that would be counted as a C death. It means technically, even if you died of clear alternate cause, but you also had CV, at the same time, it's still listed as a CV death. So everyone who's listed as a C19 death doesn't mean that that was the cause of death, but that they had it at the time of death. And then again, Burke's government classifying all deaths of patients with the C19 deaths, regardless of cause. Upper right, gunshot victims counted as Washington CV deaths. And then the Toronto Public Health also admits people who don't die from it are still added to the death count. Story on CBS, 66% of New York hospitalizations are from people that are staying home. And you see below who is getting hospitalized, 66% of the people were from lockdown, which is what they're telling us to do, versus 18% from nursing homes, 4% assisted living facilities, etc. And on August 3rd, Dr. Deborah Birx says Americans may have to start wearing masks inside of their own homes. On August 8th, Nashville councilwoman wants attempted murder charges for people who do not wear a face mask. Florida county orders residents to adhere to facial covering requirements at home. And then more in Florida, Orlando Sentinel, no mask, no child custody. C19 is a new factor in family law. And finally, Indonesians caught without a mask are forced to dig graves for the C19 victims. So are the masks working? If you see a picture of all these European countries when the mask mandates were enforced, Germany, April, United Kingdom, July, France, May, Italy, October, Spain, May, Belgium, July. And then what are we looking at here? What's the similarity? It looks like everybody's wearing masks and the cases are just stockpiling. So I'm not sure if it's really helping right now, if the CV is what they say it is. Going back into Sweden, the country that was never locked down, they're going to be the orange line in this one, which is basically flat, as the United Kingdom is just climbing straight back up. Right, so this is the European C19 cases in countries where they are requiring masks versus a no mask requirement. So the red is the no mask requirement, and that's pretty flat this entire way. The black, you'll see as we get through the fall or cold and flu season, all of those cases are spiking. So again, more similarities. For the United States, the blue on the bottom is the amount of deaths occurring versus the red line that's going straight up are the amount of cases. So again, more cases and less deaths. And all of these graphs are from Our World data. And here is a short presentation from Dr. Ted Noel where he demonstrates how aerosols the same size as the C19 or larger are not being contained inside of all of these different masks. That video is on my channel. Okay, and this video was removed from YouTube. It was Del Bigtree from the Highwire bringing his son in and experimented with a device that measures the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. Anything greater than 5,000 can result in toxicity or oxygen deprivation, according to OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. You'll see the N95 in the upper right was at 8,500, the red bandana at 9,400, the disposable mask in the lower right, 8,900, and then the face shield, which is not considered acceptable by most, is the only thing that was under at 1,500. And just like that. And here's a story from the Washington Examiner, August 7th. It says, dentists say mask mouth can cause serious health complications, including strokes. So dentists are warning about the health issues tied to prolonged use of masks to stop the spread of C19. They said dental problems associated with mask mouth, including gum disease, could lead to serious complications. Gum disease, or periodontal disease, will eventually lead to strokes and an increased risk of heart attacks. Mark Sclafani, a dentist and co-founder of One Manhattan Dental, told the New York Post about mask mouth, which is increasingly causing inflammation and gum disease among patients. Another dentist and co-founder at One Manhattan Dental, Rob Raimondi, said 50% of the patients are suffering from negative health issues due to mask wearing. We're seeing inflammation in people's gums that have been healthy forever, and cavities in people who have never had them before. About 50% of our patients are being impacted by this, so we decided to name it mask mouth, after meth mouth. Meth mouth is a term used to describe poor oral hygiene typically associated with chronic meth users. The dentist said that the new face coverings increase mouth dryness and contribute to buildup of bad bacteria. People tend to breathe through their mouth instead of through their nose while wearing a mask. The mouth breathing is causing dry mouth, which leads to decrease in saliva, and saliva is what fights the bacteria and cleanses your teeth. And you have September 2nd, mask-wearing priest collapses and dies at the pulpit while giving sermon at his church in Cameroon. And then this stuff has basically been going on the entire time, but if you guys remember, the snitches get rewards from Garcetti. He issued new rules for construction sites, encourages community to report safer at-home violators. And then same guy, the mayor of Los Angeles, threatens to shut off water and power of businesses breaking the rules. And lower left, also threatening to shut off water and power to party houses. Upper right, Ohio says not wearing a mask. Ohio starts a hotline to report people who refuse. And then on the bottom, report your neighbors to police if you see them meeting with too many people. And finally, Chicago's mayor wants to cancel Thanksgiving and stop people from having anybody over, including family. You'll see here the happy birthday song danger. Study says song may spread the CV with the P and B sounds. So not only are we canceling Thanksgiving and all holidays, but we're not allowed to sing happy birthday to our children. And if this was what they're claiming it is, don't you think the government or the television would be telling us ways of how we should be boosting our immune system to fight this? Because this meme looks pretty accurate to what we're actually living through right now. On a scale from 1 to 1984, how free do you feel while wearing a muzzle in the grocery store while following arrows on the floor? And then Richard Nixon says the American people don't believe anything until they see it on the television. Joseph Goebbels, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Friedrich Nietzsche, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. There's one additional slide that I was planning to include in this, but I recently received a strike for it, which now has me on the verge of potentially getting erased by this platform. So you'll see a link to that information below. If you guys enjoyed this or learned anything, please give me a thumbs up. And also share this video with anybody you think may need to see this information. If you guys want to see the next videos that I'm going to be putting out in this series, please be sure to subscribe to both of my channels. Alright, till next time, peace and love.